Hello and welcome to Trust and Estates Weekly. Had to remember what show it was here. I'll take my, well, no, actually, I got to be able to read. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Monday morning to start off the week at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's 1 p.m. Eastern time, of course, and an hour in for Mountain and Central time. And we look to help you understand estate planning, both for your own purposes and as a potential addition to your business where you help people with their estate plans. So if you're in investments, insurance, real estate, property management, any of those areas, law, of course, law and accounting, any of those areas that are necessary for someone creating an estate plan. So this is the place to come to learn about various issues and if you'd like, participate in the meetings, ask questions. And if you're a professional in that area already, then let me know. We'll have you on the show. Love to get your perspective on these various issues. So today, for the last, 2-3 weeks, I've been reading a number of books on dating and family life here in the United States, in particular focused on the 20th century and how things changed from the Victorian period of the late 1900s through, generally speaking, around the 1970s and 80s. And one of the big changes, of course, for anyone who's lived through that period is the dramatic increase in blended families where, either a couple divorces or one spouse dies and the other spouse gets remarried. And either there are children from the first union and then additional children from the second one, or in some cases, there are children, both people bring children to the second marriage. And so this is a more complex situation than you would, typically see where you have a couple who's been married to each other their whole life. And so they have one set of children. Now, by the way, that isn't to say that necessarily makes estate planning easier. It can certainly be complex if for various reasons your children don't get along, those kind of things, or if there's been disputes in the family. But blended families add another layer of potential complexity to it. And so I'm going to talk about a few of the most relevant issues. And as usual, I have a little PowerPoint because it makes it easier to remember things. So here we go. So Trust and Estates Weekly is our show. And everything we do here is focused on the 3 pillars of attainment. And we're dealing here in the finances realm, but we're also going to be dealing in the relationships realm, primarily with familial relationships, obviously. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to cover four issues that relate to estate planning for blended families. And then after this, we're going to talk about some strategies for dealing with those issues. So the 4 issues are multiple children from different relationships, differing financial needs, relationship dynamics, and potential for conflict. And the 4th one, of course, kind of grows out of the other 3. So let's take each of these and talk about them in a little bit of depth. So when there are children from multiple relationships or multiple marriages, right, that can cause conflict and competition among the various potential heirs to the estate. Okay, and this can be exacerbated by several things. One is, children from one relationship may be older than the other children, and so they're in a different stage of life, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, they can be more self-sufficient. And by the way, the younger children may be more self-sufficient because they were raised differently than the first group of children, and so they may, and the fact that they're self-sufficient may cause their parents to think, well, they're on their own, they don't need help. We've got to help the children who are less self-sufficient. At the same time, the ones who have worked hard to become self-sufficient may feel like, wait a minute, we worked hard to not be a burden on you. How come then in the end, we lose out on, gaining anything from the estate, right? So a lot of it comes down to making well, we'll talk about solutions. Let's first of all talk about potential problems. So as you look at your estate plan for a blended family, I think the first step is to look at who are all the potential heirs and what are the sort of qualities of those various relationships. Are some of the children minors? Are other children adults? Are some of them well along in life? Maybe they're married. Okay, so that even causes another level of complexity because now there's spouses of heirs involved, and they don't necessarily have the same kind of familial ties that the children do, and so they may advocate for their spouse to take a particular position with respect to what's being done in the estate planning. Okay, some of the children may have children, so there may be grandchildren, there may be multiple grandchildren, and how are they going to be accommodated or not within the estate plan? Okay, so all of these become relevant. Now, I'm going to put this in here because it can be relevant. So when there are multiple relationships, or multiple relationships. So let's say, a couple was married, they divorced and now remarried. Okay. So now there's, two spouses, and how has, an ex-spouse and a current spouse, how has that been dealt with? Okay. Has the divorce proceeding also dealt with whatever was happening in the estate plan? Okay, so keep that in mind as well. Okay, so multiple children from different relationships, multiple spouses, ex-spouses, whatever, all of that can be a potential source for conflict. Okay, differing financial needs. So the potential heirs may have, as I said before, maybe in different stages of their lives. And so that may lead to different financial needs for them. So let's say that one group of children is still in elementary or secondary school, high school, whatever, junior high, and the other group is already in college. Well, if the first group is going to public schools, so there isn't nearly the kind of financial cost associated with that there is for children going to college. Even if they're going to a state college or university, these days, the cost can be quite significant. Okay, and so they may be in need of more financial aid. On the other hand, if they have financial resources at their disposal, so that may mean that they qualify for less financial aid, either through the federal government or state governments or through private sources. So those kinds of issues create different financial needs. Another situation, there could be a situation, another case could be a situation where one or more family members is disabled in some way. Maybe they're neurodiverse, autism or Down syndrome, and so they need support services, more support services than someone who's not neurodiverse. Okay. They may be physically handicapped, and as a result, for example, they may need special equipment to drive a car or something like that that's more expensive than a regular car. They may not be able to live on their own at all. They may need in-home support in order to live. So all of these create differing financial needs for different potential heirs. Okay. Now, another situation is where there are grandchildren. So the children who are heirs now have children. And of course, there's costs associated with raising children. And so the children with children have a different financial need than people who are single. Okay. So all of these are, absolutely ripe areas for disputes to come up between heirs. And I'll say, just as a slight digression here, the idea that heirs don't fight until the person who created the estate plan is deceased is not true at all. Heirs will start fighting when they're, they won't necessarily do so, but some will start fighting long before the person is even sick enough to be thought that they may die soon. Okay, so when there's money on the table, that can be a source of conflict. And so these all need to be worked out and dealt with really sooner rather than later. A path is the wrong word, but a sort of baseline needs to be set of how you're going to deal with these, either as the person planning the estate or as someone advising them. Okay, relationships dynamics are next. So do the children from different families get along? Are they estranged? Do the children from the same, set of parents get along, or are they estranged? All of those relationship dynamics come into play, and you may find that other dynamics you didn't know about come into play as well. So there could be sort of underground, if you will, rivalries, or the word I'm looking for is not coming to me, but resentments is the word I'm looking for. There could be sort of unexpressed resentments between children of the same parents or children of different parents. The children of different parents, they may feel that the children from the more recent marriage are being treated much better than they were treated, maybe because there was a lot of conflict between their parents, and as a result, the children feel that they are not being treated equally or as decently as the others. It could be that when person got remarried, the children from the new spouse resent the person marrying their parent, and so those kind of resentments can go on, and they may, on the face of it, people may be playing very nice and they're polite and all of that, but then when it comes time to deal with estate planning issues, some of these things come bubbling to the surface, and now they have to be dealt with. So it's wise to explore relationship dynamics both with your spouse and with your children. And, exploring them as a group may be a fraught process. It may be better to talk to them one-on-one. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more again about ways of approaching this in the next slide. Okay, but if you've got a blended family where everybody gets along, everybody is mutually supportive, so it may not be that much of an additional strain in creating your estate plan. But to the extent that there are difficult relationships, so that just makes doing the estate planning more challenging. Okay. Finally, potential for conflict. So for all of the foregoing reasons, there are there's much more potential for conflict. Okay. And so a lot more work needs to be done to try to avoid conflict. Okay. They say, blood is thicker than water. And that is oftentimes the case. And so when you have, step brothers and sisters, stepchildren, that old adage can come to the foreground. Okay. Now, by the way, sometimes what happens is, in order to compensate for this idea that blood is thicker than water, the stepchildren get treated better or with more care than the natural children, the blood children, however you want to describe that. And that too can cause some resentment. So, it's something to look at very carefully and really give some thought to. Jot some notes down as you're doing it, so you don't forget various issues that come to mind, or questions that need to be asked. Okay, that way you can be as thorough and as foresightful, if that's a word, as possible as you approach your estate planning. And as advisors, encourage your clients to do that, to really think about these things, talk them over, and then take the next steps from there, which is what we're going to do looking at the next slide. So, how do you avoid potential conflicts based on the foregoing 4 points? So first of all, communicate with your spouse and children. Okay, before making decisions, or at least before announcing any decisions, okay, talk to your spouse, talk to all of the children involved. If there's grandchildren, you may want to talk to them as well, depending on how old they are. Now, if they're very young, then, probably not. But if they're, teenagers or in college, it could be a very good idea to talk to them and get their thoughts. You may get some insight into their parents, your children, that you weren't really aware of. Okay. I'm sure you've heard the old adage, out of the mouths of babes, right? So, not that people in college are babes, but, they're younger, and they may be more candid with you than your children are, just in the interest of, talking to you. And look, let's be honest. Sometimes grandchildren have a closer, more open relationship with grandparents than the children do with their parents. And so there can be a greater free flow of communication, and you can come to understand things in a deeper way than you would have if you excluded the grandchildren or the step grandchildren from the conversation. So cast your net broadly as you and your advisors deem prudent. Obviously, you don't want to put small children under the burden of having difficult discussions that they may not understand, or they may not feel comfortable about, that they may feel they're betraying a parent. Okay, so if they're too young to understand those kind of things overtly, yet they can kind of understand them inside, so then probably want to tread with more caution. Okay, so next thing in terms of dealing with the potential conflicts, etc., is consider using a trust. So if you set up a trust, okay, everything can be mapped out. There's less left to discretion, okay, and in that way, everybody can know before your passing what the situation will be, okay? And whether you're using a living trust, an inter vivos trust, or you're using even multiple trusts, there's lots of different ways to do it. This is something you're going to want to talk about with your accountant and legal advisor, your attorney, and see how could using this tool facilitate a situation where there's less opportunity for conflict to erupt and cause heirs or potential heirs to challenge the estate, to run up legal fees, and all of those kind of things. So the clearer you can be in the documents you use to create your estate plan, and then going back to the first one, communicating that back to your spouse and children. Now, if you have a spouse, presumably you're building your estate plan together, although not necessarily, okay? But you want to communicate back to them once the plan is done. Just because it's done doesn't mean that it is, unchangeable for all time. After you get it done and you present it and you talk about it, you get some input, you may decide to make some alterations. Perfectly legitimate to do that. It's a good process to go through. It can be very difficult to get things the way you want them, especially the way you want them in terms of reducing potential for conflict on the first go around. Okay, so if it necessitates making some changes, so make some changes, present it again. And look, that doesn't mean you may not be able to satisfy everyone, or for that matter, anyone. There may be a point where you have to say, look, this is the best it's going to be. I have a friend who's a lawyer who says, when I negotiate a transaction, if both sides are unhappy, it's probably going to stick. Right? Because if one side is really happy and the other isn't, then there's an imbalance there. But if both are kind of unhappy, well, so all right, everybody got some things they wanted, they didn't get other things they wanted. Okay, that's probably a pretty reasonable negotiation. So and then again, documenting that in a trust may be a better way to handle it than putting it in a will. Okay, next, you might consider choosing a neutral fiduciary. Okay, so especially if there's a lot of conflict between the potential heirs, choosing one of them to administrate your estate, whether as an executor, executrix, or as a administrator, or as a trustee in the trust, that alone may trigger conflict. Okay, and especially if you've got two different groups of children, children and stepchildren, and they don't get along. So if a representative comes from one group, the other group is likely to feel slighted or cheated. Okay, if you have more than one representative, you may set up a situation where, because they come from different groups that don't get along, that just making decisions becomes virtually impossible because they're all always arguing. Okay, so it may work better to choose a neutral fiduciary. Okay, so here in California, I've mentioned this a few times, like I'm a professional fiduciary. So there is this role called professional fiduciary, and our job is to administrate estates and trusts, et cetera, with that fiduciary obligation, and in accordance with the wishes of the grantor in the case of a trust. So we're not involved in the emotions and such that may be going on between the heirs or the members of the children and the stepchildren, et cetera. And so we can be more objective in handling decisions. Okay, also, it doesn't then put the pressure on a member of your family to be making decisions that maybe they're not comfortable making. Maybe they want to be fair and they feel they're acting in a fair way, but then their siblings, their blood siblings, feel like, well, why are you bending over backwards to benefit the stepkids? And now we're losing out. Now the person's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. So rather than putting one of your heirs or one of your children in that position, it might work out better to choose a neutral fiduciary, one who is not connected in any way with the family. And that way, again, the person can be more objective. I would add too that if you have a situation where you feel conflict could potentially arise. So it may be better to choose someone with experience in dealing as either an executor, executrix, or as an administrator, or as a trustee, and has dealt with some of these kinds of problems before, and so they can approach them with some problem solving, some relationship mediating skills, rather than choosing someone who has no experience in it, and therefore is really kind of thrown into the fire, so to speak, and really kind of flails around in trying to figure out how to make all of this work. Okay, finally, update your estate regularly. That's what this last word here, as I bled over onto the white. I didn't notice that when I put the slide together. So as I was saying before, when you put your estate plan together, you communicate it back to your spouse, your children, your stepchildren, all whatever, and you'll get some input. You may make some changes in order to set up the initial estate plan, but then periodically you're going to want to review it. There may be changes in the family composition. There may be changes in the family dynamics. There may be changes in any number of these issues. So financial needs may change, relationship dynamics may change. Okay. God forbid, children could, predecease you. So for all of those reasons and many more, it makes sense to periodically review your estate plan with your advisors, your accountant, your lawyer. Again, if there's real estate, so you may have a real estate advisor, your investment advisor, et cetera. Maybe you want to take a look at it every year, maybe every 2 years, maybe anytime there is a family changing event, a birth or a death. There can be various triggers. Again, talk to your advisors about that and determine what makes the most sense for your situation. And as advisors, okay, we should be periodically reaching out to our clients and just touching base and saying, hey, have there been any changes that may require, reviewing your estate plan? Okay, and if the answer is no, then okay, great. So, hey, good talking to you. Take care. I'll touch base with you again in 6 months, or I'll touch base with you again, this time next year, or the person may say, gosh, nothing's happening right now, but 3 months from now, one of my children is getting married, and blah 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 blah. I don't have the time to do it right now. We're in the midst of planning a wedding. Say, okay, well, let me follow up with you, say in about 4 months after the wedding is done, and we can just discuss it and see if there's anything that needs to be done, and that way you're helping your clients help themselves by keeping their estate plan up to date. Okay, so that is an overview of estate planning for blended families. If you need any help, here's different ways to get it. You can send me an email at thewaytowowshow@bemel.com. Here's a few social media links. All of this will be in the show notes after the episode posts to our YouTube channel, okay, which is YouTube.com/@thewaytowow. And you can go there and view all of today's episodes, as well as all of our past episodes for all of our shows. So let's see, I think the next thing is just the legal stuff, right? Yep, legal stuff. And let's go ahead and stop sharing. Okay, so that's the show for today. Short and sweet, just helping you recognize this kind of, little bit different area of estate planning, again, both for yourself and as someone who works with people creating their estate plans. So tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time is my show, Business Lessons from the Military, and we'll be continuing with our discussion of dealing with cultural issues and how we can deal with them to create better teams and make our businesses more successful. And then on Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time is People Making Money, and we're going to be talking about what I've been putting in quotes is the quote unquote magic of compound interest. So if you've never really looked at this and how it works, I think you will find it quite interesting, and it'll really help you expand your knowledge of how to invest wisely. It's gonna be a little bit numbers oriented. Okay, so we're gonna do some math, but don't be concerned about that. As I've said in the past, really investing isn't math, it's money. And I think most of us find money easier to deal with than math. There's not going to be any geometry or algebra, that kind of thing. But we'll make sure. I'll make sure that it's done as comprehensible as possible. And then next week, 7 days from today, will be the next edition of Trusts and Estates Weekly. So I invite you to join me for all of our shows. And I mentioned the YouTube channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please do consider subscribing. That way, you'll always know when a new episode is airing, and you won't miss anything. So thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Signing off, Marie, darling, you are my belle. Take care, everyone.